Good morning, afternoon, evening everyone, and welcome to week 2 of the 100% Cricket Leading the Game series. Today we will be talking 100% performance. I would now like to hand over to our host for today, Mel Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Holly, and welcome to everyone tuning in this evening or tuning in later on at their convenient time as well. We had a magnificent kickstart to 100% cricket last week, talking all things leadership with Claire Connor and Katie Sadlier from World Rugby. And this week, I'm delighted to say that we've got two magnificent guests. I played with one of them and I commentated on the other, so we're going back a little bit in time. Our first guest is Dr Urooj Mumtaz Khan, an absolute trailblazer in Pakistan women's cricket and world cricket for that matter as well. Get a load of this for a little bit of a CV. Former national captain, commentator, hosts her own sports show, black belt in Taekwondo, selector, and a trained dental surgeon. Now, in March 2019, she became the first female selector of a 3-person selection committee for the national women's team, and she was also the first woman elected to the PCB Cricket Committee. As well as that, as of October of last year, Uruz is now the interim head of women's cricket at the Pakistan Cricket Board, and in this position she oversees the implementation of the PCP's vision to expand women's high performance academies right throughout Pakistan and revolutionise the women's senior team by developing new talented players. Now, if you put all that together, her bio should read, she is now 75 years of age, but she's only 34. How do you fit it all in?
Well, first of all, welcome and thank you, ladies. It's a pleasure being here. But Mel, I've been asked that question a lot of times, but I really have no answer to it. Just probably happened to be in the right place at the right time, given the opportunity really to do all those. And then luckily cricket came along where most of these things then became a reality rather than just a dream. But it's been a wonderful journey, to say the least.
Okay, thoroughly looking forward to picking your brain on all things high performance this evening or this morning or this afternoon. And our next guest, and I've got a little swear jar next to me for every time that I call her Price, not Julia, because we are very good friends. We do have Julia Price, who's the head coach of the USA Women's Program, a late starter to cricket, so just 16 years of age when she was first introduced to the game, but was a very fast learner, becoming Australia's wicketkeeper for a 9-year period, which include 94 international appearances, including that 2 World Cup wins and 2 Ashes wins as well. Now, once she retired from playing international cricket, then turned her hand to coaching, with coaching experiences with Ireland, Holland and the Netherlands while she was playing. That was the early 2000s. And then transitioned to the head coach of the Tasmanian Roar for a 5-year period, which also included the first 3 years of the WBBL with the Hobart Hurricanes as well. In 2019, she became the USA head coach, becoming the first ever female coach, also involved in the men's Big Bash here in Australia with the Brisbane Heat. Julia is at the heart of the evolution of the USA women's cricket team, professionalising the system in a widespread country, and is using her own experiences as a player and coach in its semi-professional environments to guide this process. And I know you're in Tassie at the moment, Julia. There we go. Just almost slipped into the first prize of the day already. Electricity in Tasmania still, has it been switched on?
It's all good. Yep,
okay,
it's all good. And I just you'd actually let me go before Dr Urooj, because I look completely like a nuffy now after the introduction that she got for Pakistan. And I am 75 years of age, so, you know.
We might do a little translation of the word nuffy for people, just not someone, global game and all, but we'll get through it. Guys, both of you have played international. I might start with you, Julia. Both have played internationally. When you were with the Australian women's cricket team, I'd like to think that it was a professional team, even though we weren't professional in the sense of getting paid. When you were playing, were you thinking to yourself that you wanted to get into the whole realm of coaching and being involved in high performance programs?
No, actually, it wasn't really the case. It was more a case of, because we weren't getting paid, I needed a way of getting some income. So it sort of helped, but I found after a while I did really enjoy it. But I also found, because I'd started quite late, in fact, I think it was nearly 18 that I started, but anyway, it really helped me understand the game a little bit more by being able to teach others the game. So to me, it sort of helped me progress my own game a lot faster, understand what I was doing and how I was developing, but at the same time being able to grow the game for boys and girls, firstly in Australia and obviously a little bit later on in a few countries that aren't completely traditional cricket countries.
Now, Urooj, I'm guessing you didn't have time to think that you were going to go into coaching at all with all the things that you've already done. Was it part of the plan at all?
No, not really. I think when we were playing, it was more about getting the results, becoming better players, announcing Pakistan women's cricket at the global stage. But never did I think that I would get into a proper position within the admin role in trying to. But there was always a sense of giving back, because from where we started in terms of women's cricket, we used to buy our own fruit on match days. That's where we've come from. For some time, training sessions would be washing our own clothes, and we would be so tired. We would tell the SNC, "That's it. We've done our upper body for today." So you know, it coming from there was always a sense of giving back, and that's what I think drove me saying yes to this role, really.
My first ever international injury was stretching a pec muscle because we were washing clothes on a tour of India, and that would have been with you, Julia. Transitioning from playing into now this role at the moment, I know there's probably a number of players that are tuning in, as there was last week. Any sort of tips or advice on, while they're playing now, what they can do to try and upskill themselves if this is the path that they want to go down? Sorry if that's for you, Julia.
Right. And I'm Julia. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I found it really quite helpful to be able to coach at the same time, because of the self-reflection you can do, the way you're going to present things. You really have to think about how you're going to talk about what elements of the game you're going to teach people, and then generally you're drawing on your own experiences from that as well. So you do tend to assess yourself a fair bit as well. So I mean, I think there's plenty of opportunities to go out there in every state, county, wherever you're at. They generally have an underage program. And start with some young kids, because kids are keen as, they're really easy to coach. They generally are sponges and they just want to soak up all this information. So it's a really good way to start, as well as people are always looking for either volunteers or even just as a casual sort of job. I think it's a great way to promote yourself, one, as a player, and help grow the sport itself by promoting identities and getting female role models out there. But at the same time, you're also helping grow the game, grassroots level, maybe in that sort of pathway program as well. So playing and coaching is a very good combination.
Now, all three of us have had numerous chats over the last week talking all things high performance. I think before we actually get into the nitty gritty of it all, I'd love to get your own sense of a definition. And I know this is going to be a reasonably tough one for you, but your own definition, and I might start with you, Uruz, about what you think high performance actually is.
Again, I think it's $1 million question, isn't it? Because high performance would look very different to people in different stages. So, for instance, if I talk about Pakistan women's cricket, we're at an infancy stage, literally going into, if you might call it, adolescent years in the next 18 months. And to us, high performance is basically a culture that is set by the certain values you give to your women's sport. Really then derived and driven by the attitude and the vision you put behind it. It might sound a bit of a few complex words, but it truly is the value that we give to our women's sport and the culture. And essentially, there's obviously, we'll talk about this in detail, what pins the culture that we need to drive, a certain set of philosophies and principles that we need to have. But for me, it would be a culture. So I really don't think there would be a set definition for this.
Julia, does that resonate with you in your own definition?
Yeah, very much so. It is about the players. To me, the players really drive it. It doesn't really matter what resources you've got, what facilities you've got. Obviously, they can really make a big difference in the long run, but it's about the attitudes of those players that you've got and their commitment to your programs. And if they aren't committed, it doesn't matter if you've got the best coach in the world, if you've got the best cricket field in the world. If the players aren't going to put in the work, well, it's not high performance.
I'd like to get a sense from both of you, from within Pakistan and the USA cricket setups, how closely your high performance values and program aligns with your men's program. Urooj, we were talking about this probably about half an hour ago, just to see if there are similarities or differences.
So for us, high performance is literally work in progress. It's something we've picked up on. Previously, there was no high performance or formal structure within the women's game. Anything that we've done so far hasn't really been planned or hasn't come off a proper structure. So what we've done is we're taking help from external consultants as well, and we're trying to build a high performance the Pakistan way, which is, I think, very important to what we believe and what our values are. What we've done is we've aligned a lot of our philosophies within the men's structure, whereas in terms of infrastructure and facilities, we all align ourselves. So we're all talking about the same philosophy, derived by trust, constructive conflict, collective goals, and essentially shared values within the Pakistan system. But then still run women's cricket parallel to men in terms of what kind of brand of cricket the women's team wants to play and what we want to set ourselves as at the global stage, what the Pakistan women's team is looking to do at the international stage in terms of the quality of players we provide. So it's a bit of a parallel setup, but still obviously defining our own path.
Julie, you've spent a bit of time in the States now, travelling back and forth a little bit. How closely is the men's and women's programs aligned over there?
Yeah, well, we're not travelling too much at the moment, but it's getting closer. Particularly over the last year or so. September last year, we had our new CEO start, and he's very keen on getting the men's and women's programs being overarching of the entire program. We also had Richard Doan, who's just started with us in February this year, who's the new operations director, and he also is very keen to make sure that what's happening in the men's program is also happening in the female program. What I do like about the system at the moment is I meet with the head coach, the men's head coach, myself and Richard Doan each week, and there's a lot of information sharing, and it's always been in the past that an assumption that the women's game can learn from the men's game, but I really like the way we're working in America at the moment, and the fact that they're actually taking ideas from the female program into the men's program. So it's really a different way of looking at things. I'm not sure if that's American or if it's just the way it's evolved, but it's actually really exciting, and obviously puts a lot of value on my experiences, and I feel like I'm really integrated into the American cricket program over there. So it's been quite exciting so far.
I think you've just provided me with my highlight already from this discussion. That's fantastic to hear. Right, so we've chatted a little bit about the definition of it, and if I can sort of nut it down, succinctly in a sense, we're talking about it's a culture whereby it's values and the attitudes that drive that culture, but in and amongst that, it's the importance of the players buying into that as well. So not so much about the funding and resources as much, but about the commitment to the program itself. If we can drill down just a little bit more now as well, what I'd love to get from both of you, and Julie, we might start with you, are your top 5 priorities in terms of creating that successful high performance program?
Yeah, well, of course, the $1 million that you were talking about before, Uruz, would be very handy, but what we definitely want to start with is the engagement and commitment of those players. Like we said before, that's important to be able to make sure that you get your culture and your values, everything correct very early on. One person can make a big difference in a team, either in a negative and a positive way. So you've got to get everyone on the same page. Initially, when I was thinking about this, I put staff in there as well, commitment from them, but it was actually, I think that's nearly a second point. So the support staff have also got to be able to be engaged and committed to the program, to make sure that there's that trust, because relationships are so important when you're building a new program, and you need to make sure that everyone's going in the same direction, everyone can talk and be completely open and vulnerable, and have a great trust back and forth, trusting that they're going to do the program, and also trusting the staff are going to do their utmost to get them to be able to become the best athlete they can be. I also thought that we need to have a complementary pathway programs for the players, so that there is healthy competition. At the moment, we don't obviously have that as much in America, so it'd be great to get that upward push from a lot of our young kids coming through. Obviously, the ICC recently announcing they're going to have an under-19 World Cup for girls has sent a shockwave of excitement through the women's cricket world for a lot of young girls, knowing that they might have an opportunity to play in an under-8 World Cup. So that's been really good for opening up opportunities in the States at the moment. So I think those programs are really good, as well as connecting to the grassroots. Without those grassroots cricket and leagues, you know, we don't have high performance really, because it'll be the bottom level then. So we need to be able to have that upward push all the time and have those leagues happening. I also think there should be objective measuring of performances and having those sort of systems for feedback, for monitoring and improvement and pretty much motivation as well. So that's constant in both ways, and it also assists with preventing injury in the players and making sure that we can, from all that information that they're giving, it's a two-way conversation. It's not just them telling us, putting all their details down and what they're doing. It's us being able to use that information in a way that's going to benefit them as well. And lastly, I said there, that community engagement and having stakeholder relationships, I think, is vitally important. All the way from making sure the board is on par with what you're trying to do as a coach and in a high performance environment, but also making sure that they've also got upward push in the development side of things, that they're going to be creating heaps of players out there that are going to be wanting to be in the program at some stage.
Urooj, I saw you just nodding a lot as Julia was speaking there as well. Does that mean that there's a lot of similarities with what you think about the priorities in and around a high performance program?
I think Julia's hit the nail on the head, really. I think she's covered basically the entire summary of how this works, how everything fits into place. She's covered all the principles that fit in. But in terms of Pakistan women's cricket, I think the biggest thing that we need to look into now is we're at a stage where we're expected to provide results. We expect results at a global stage just because of where Pakistan women's cricket is right now. And because we consider full member, it doesn't necessarily depict where Pakistan women's cricket is. We're quite new in compared to other cricketing nations. So it's a challenge for us, because what we are trying to do is having all those bases in place. We're trying to create a culture which is, again, like Julia rightly said, derived by the players themselves. It has to be their inner sanctum. They need to police it. They need to hold each other accountable and empower each other. So it's basically an on and off field culture that we need to have within our high performance. Again, shared by the accountability part of things as well. And again, the one thing that I really would need in most high performance setups is the use of digital modern day technology. And I really feel that is a prime essence of high performance as well. Because again, coming back to the definition of high performance, I think there's a very fine line that separates the greatest of the game compared to the rest of the world. So I think it needs to work for what defines your culture. But I think what Julia said completely resonates with all the high performances. You have to have your research in there, your innovations in there, and obviously pathway programs, the under-19s, all of it really. So, and I think that's something that will resonate within all systems.
Well, while you guys were giving all that intel, we have actually closed the first poll. So we're just going to pause briefly because we want to see the results. And I'm tipping some of the words that you've just mentioned are probably going to be in this as well. So the first poll was, tell us in one word what is critical to a successful women's high performance program. And if you viewed in last week, you'll know that the bigger the word means the more votes or the more times that word came through. So couple of the major ones there was commitment, participation, consistency, support, planning and funding, but the main one was investment. And we spoke about the $1 million getting driven into programs before. It certainly does help, but there's certainly lots of other things that you can do in and around your program to make it successful. So fantastic for everyone to be involved in that one. We do have another live poll as the evening goes on as well. I want to pick up on, we were talking about 5 key priorities to making a successful program, but there's also then what does that program look like? And there's the old tried and true saying, is it all about results or is it about the process? Uruz, I'm just going to pick up on what you said then at the moment, being a full member and now the expectation that this program does deliver on the results front. Is that purely the only thing that you're looking at in terms of a successful program, or are you looking at other things as well?
Again, I think it's a very interesting or exciting time for women's cricket in Pakistan, because we're at a catch-22 situation, because all the results that we have put up and up till the win against West Indies in the World Cup, haven't been really by design. They've just happened because of not a high performance culture being in place. So for us, it's very important to realize that, because we need to invest into our results-oriented approach as well at the top level, where our national team lies, along with investing highly into the pathway programs to constantly produce that result. And I think Mel and I, we were speaking about this earlier, the missing link for us is consistency. And that's where we need to bridge the gap, really. So it's very exciting for me being in a position where we can bring all of this together. But obviously it's going to take its time. So for us, it is looking at both at the same time.
I know that you've got a strategic plan coming out in a little bit of time. It's under wraps at the moment, so we won't give it all away. But you also mentioned that whole aspect of inspiring the next generation of players as well, which is pretty key for Pakistan.
Absolutely. I mean, we've got a 5-year strategic plan in place, and right on top of that, the pinnacle of it is inspiring the generation by smashing boundaries. And that really hits me right to the core, that because that is essentially what we are trying to drive in terms of valuing women's cricket. We need to inspire the generation by literally smashing the boundaries. The amount of boundaries we have, I mean, they might all, obviously, all of you might have those boundaries in all over different countries. But the cultural issues, the society, there's so many boundaries within our community, within our country, that literally we have to smash our way through them. And I think, to me, that would be the biggest success for women's cricket in Pakistan, that if we manage to literally have every girl playing cricket within her back door and her family readily allowing her to do so. So if we can inspire the generation, I think we'll do a fantastic job.
Julia, the USA Cricket, they hire you as the head coach, former Ashes winning, World Cup winning Australian player. So was there an expectation that the USA will be winning left, right and centre, and was that the main KPI?
Actually, it was, which was a little scary. It was, but it was mainly just about, at that stage, we had to beat Canada to get into the World Cup qualifiers. So the whole focus was just about beating Canada, and then we could reassess after that. So unfortunately, we did that very well, and made it through to the qualifiers. Probably that's where we sort of changed what the direction of the team was. Obviously, it was the first time we'd got that far in any sort of competition, so it was more about changing. Our success was about improvement and taking on feedback and commitment to programs, and filling in your AMS and doing things like that. That was what the players hadn't been used to previously. So to us, getting them engaged in the program and wanting to do all that sort of stuff and wanting to improve, and then seeing that on the field was probably the key for our success, when we call that a successful tour.
So you get into this program, you set all these things up, the players engage with it, they're on board, and then all of a sudden COVID-19 happens, which no one could plan. How has it put a spanner in the works, or has it allowed you other opportunities with the players, and how have they grappled with that as well?
Yeah, and well, in fact, I think it's been good for our group, because we've actually been able to sit back and take a moment and really sort of look at what we need to work on. And I suppose, like, the mental side, and particularly because I'm based in Australia and Hobart, I can't see the girls a lot. So we've got an opportunity now to really work on the mental side of the game, which we haven't had a lot of opportunities for previously. And even the time I had with Tasmania, I would have loved to have spent more time on the mental side of the game, but there's always that pressure to be getting out in the nets and bowling and batting and fielding, and probably not spending the amount of time we could on the mental side. So now that we've got all this time sitting down at home in front of our computers, we can start reading some professional development articles, we can start doing some mindfulness, we can start doing a mental resilience online programs that we've all started with the girls, and even just start doing some tactical analysis of our opposition and of ourselves, and self-assessments and all those sort of things that we probably don't spend enough time on previously. It's been really good. The only issue we've got now is, how do we take all that information that we've done for the last 2 months or so, and once we can go back into the nets, how do we not forget that? How do we start incorporating all of that stuff into the physical side of the game as well?
Is Is it ironic that most people say that cricket is one of the most mentally tough games and it's played 90% of the games played above the shoulders, yet we don't actually invest time in it?
Yeah, I know, it's crazy, isn't it? Literally crazy. So, exactly right. So, you know, people can see you having a hit and people can see you bowling, but they can't see you doing the mental side of it. But I think, and I think that is also a stigma we need to get past, is, you know, all because you mightn't look like you're doing all the training, someone sitting down and meditating for 5 minutes might be exactly what they need. I mean, we saw Mitali Raj before she bats and likes to read a book, and obviously that's how she gets you. That's nice and relaxed, and you know, gets in the right headspace by doing something like that. And admittedly, she's a slightly older player, and the older you get, the more tricks you try and find to get you through things. But it'd be great if we can get our younger players really engaging in this early and getting in some good mental habits.
Yeah. Uruz, for the Pakistan high performance program, have they been grappling this time in COVID-19?
I think it's been a little tough for the players because, like Julia just mentioned, the players want to be out there. They want to hit the ball. They want to run around. Obviously, they want to feel. Cricket is about a feel and a rhythm as well. But I think more importantly, like I said, the mental aspect of things allows you to perform consistently under those high stress and high pressure situation, which basically defines you to win the games. And so what we did was we had 2 online sessions. One with obviously the legend Wasim Akram with our core group of 24 girls. And the other one that we had was with Babar Azam, one of the finest batsmen of modern day cricket. And I think we got some tremendous feedback. It went really down with the girls. And they both concentrated. They obviously told us their inspiring stories. Both of them have wonderfully inspiring stories about their hardships, but more importantly, they touch on the mental side of things. Just shows so much more how that is important. So for us, it's almost like an opportunity to, like Julia said, sit back and peel off the layers of what we've been doing right, what we can plan ahead. But it is a bit of a challenge as well, because for Pakistan, there's an interesting year coming up ahead. We've got the qualifiers, we've got the Asia Cup, we've got the Under-19 World Cup, and we've got the 50-over World Cup. And obviously, we're looking to produce the results. So it's constantly trying to innovate ideas to keep the girls engaged. So we've done online fitness as well. So we've, with the SNC coaches, well and truly sort of keeping at them constantly for their online fitness sessions as well. And the one thing that we're working on is mental resilience and toughness sessions with the girls, which I think is the key to consistent success. And like you said, it is more percentage. I wouldn't know 90%, 80%, but obviously above the shoulders. And I think that if we can get that missing link, we'll start turning the tables a lot. So those are the things that we've been doing in COVID-19 times, really.
Well, speaking of missing links, and both of you have mentioned it, and it was mentioned in the poll as the #1 element in terms of developing women's high performance programs is investment. So both want you to think about this opportunity where the board comes knocking on your door or your CEO and says, right, here's some extra cash. And the big question for me, particularly in situations both for Pakistan and for the USA, is where do you spend it? You've already spoken a bit about where your programs are at, and there's slightly different situations at the moment, but there's this want, I think, from most organisations to have a gender neutral, gender equity across their programs. So do you put in match fees, or do you put in business class flights to match with the guys? Or do you say, well, hang on a minute, we don't have this domestic program or structured pathways, and we need to invest there. I need an extra assistant coach. It's a can of worms. I'm going to go to you first, Urooj, to give me your thoughts on it. Julia's loving this, just to get her head around it all a little bit more quickly. What do you do with the money?
Well, I guess the $1 million is coming, but realistically speaking, I think in Pakistan there's been a massive paradigm shift in terms of valuing the women's game, and it has a lot with the CEO Ehsan Mani and Wasim Khan, Chairman Ehsan Mani and CEO Wasim Khan. They've literally grabbed women's cricket by the scruff of the neck. And very earlier on, it was mentioned that it'll be one of the key pillars of the PCB moving forward, and that resonates with the improvement that we've been able to do. And I think Mel very rightly said, look, it's a difficult situation because when you compare the men and women's game, the women's game in Pakistan is just not quite there at the moment. So when you talk about equality in terms of pay packages or remuneration, it's difficult to balance it. So what we did was we increased central contract remuneration and started flying the girls business class to feel them to make them feel more empowered and valued. But the major chunk of it went into our domestic and pathway programs. So what we did, for the first time in history of Pakistan women's cricket, we started paying girls at the domestic level for match fees. And that resonated really, really well, because then we were catering, incentivizing, keeping 56 players motivated compared to the 10 centrally contracted players. But it's a difficult task because you need a shared set of values which everyone buys into. And the most important asset within that is the players. So once they buy into that, I think everybody becomes happy. And I can see Julia, she has this massive smile on her face. But I think that's what it is. I think it's a different situation for Pakistan because the funding is now coming in, which is absolutely fantastic and is very exciting for us. We're almost in line to getting a high performance center exclusively for the Pakistan women's team, which is going to be massive for us. It changes the game completely for us. And I think when the players see all of those things collectively happening and we're all on the same page, I think it's a whole different story.
Nodding away there, Julie. Does it help, Julie, that when you were playing, there was no money in the game, and you're the game was sort of transitioning a little bit there, so you can understand where the players are at the moment?
Yeah, I can understand it. It's funny because obviously in America they have Title IX, which is pretty much a thing that allows whatever the men get that the women get. So it creates some interesting discussions, particularly when the player base in America is very, very low, like sub 100 girls playing in any sort of structured competition. So therefore it makes it really difficult to compare the men's game and the women's game in the country. So I'm with Uruz here, particularly with regards to it's a holistic approach. You know, you want your players to understand that, yeah, they're going to be the pioneers of the game, particularly in America at the moment. They're going to be the ones that people are going to look out for. At the moment, we're actually doing a little bit on difficult women, and so we've got people like Beta Ginsberg and Shonda Rhimes and Amelia Earhart and all these famous women that have done these amazing things, and everyone knows everything about them. And there's no reason why our cricketers who are currently in the program aren't going to be those big names that go, one day someone's going to go, wow, that girl was the first captain of America, so of the American women's team. So I think it's important they understand that it's great to be part of something that's going to be in the future that they mightn't benefit right now, but they can benefit from it by supporting it and driving it themselves and buying into what we're trying to do to grow the game in the country.
The phrase difficult women, which sort of leads into a whole nother discussion about language being used in the game as well, but we'll leave that for another 100% webinar because we've run out of time. It's now 35 past the hour, so we're going to close our discussion. I've still got a bazillion questions, as you know, so we can come back, but having a look at the questions coming in from the audience, I think this will be the last time we really speak to each other. So we're going to throw it open. So just a reminder that if you do want to put a question to either of our two guests, please type it in the comments section, pop your name down and your country so we know where you're coming from. And the first couple here is interesting because it actually picks up, Uruz, on a couple of things that you were mentioning in and around growing up in Pakistan. So it's a reasonably longish question, so bear with me here for a second. Dr. Urooj, you were an inspiration for both men and women cricketers. Your achievements and qualifications are admirable and envious at the same time. Well done. Your achievements may not be possible without the support of your loved ones. Pakistan being a conservative country, it would be interesting to know how much support as a cricketer and as a professional you receive from your family. What would be your expectations? What would be your expectations from the parents and husbands to support aspiring women cricketers?
Well, look, I think that's a really good question, and it fits in perfectly with the cultural issues or the boundaries or the obstacles we have here. And that's where our vision statement comes in, inspiring the generation by smashing boundaries. We've had a lot of inspiring stories where girls have literally had to dress up like a boy sneak out of their house without their fathers, without their brothers finding out where they're going, and they're going to play cricket. We've had talent lost because parents and family wouldn't allow them to come and play women's cricket. We've had to actually go into households and let them know that it's okay, we'll take care of your girls, they will be under our wings. And it's very, very important. I can't emphasize enough of how much your immediate family support matters. Because once you have that, they can deal with the rest of the outside bubble without letting it come to you. And I think that's a shift in thinking and the mentality that we're seeing, and hence we see the number growing. And I think that's where giving back comes in. If we can produce role models, and that's what women's cricket does, or women's sport does. It's not just about the game, it's the generations it can inspire, the role models it brings up. And it almost gives a sense of the girls to dream. And I always find this resonating very highly with women, that sometimes we're not even allowed to dream. And that's something that we're looking to do. If the girls can dream, trust me, there's nothing stopping them. So I think if we can change that culture, it's going to be wonderful within Pakistan.
Yeah, and I think the World Cup final on March 8, International Women's Day, probably allowed millions of more girls to dream as well. It was a fantastic question. It was from Mohammed Hussain from Cyprus Cricket. So I'm thinking already that if he needs extra coaching or support, that all three of us would be more than happy to come over and give him a little bit of help. This question here for Julia from Kanika Vegas. What has been taken from the women's game for the men's game? You mentioned that earlier in the discussion.
Good point. We've been doing a few of the mindfulness apps. So the Smiling Mind is a non-profit app, a meditation app in Australia. It was actually started by females, which is always great as well. So that's one of the things that we've introduced to the boys. I mean, again, the boys are very old school. They love their having a hit, having a bowl, so it's sort of they're quite interesting to do this. We've also done a few professional development things. We did one on sleep and the benefits of it, and also how to get a better night's sleep, and some suggestions. And one of them was having protein before you go to dinner, before you go to bed. So, and a lot of people, we've been getting some really good feedback about a few of the different PDs we're doing. So it's plenty of stuff, but more of the it's very much off-field stuff at this stage. But you never know, we might be able to teach them a new shot or a new ball. You never know. Sorry,
you're teaching the boys off-field stuff.
Yeah.
We'll leave that one there. We do have one from Sarah from Cricket Australia, being very formal, and rightly so too. Dr. Khan, what would you recommend for those of us in other countries seeking to get more girls from Pakistani families playing cricket?
Very interesting, because I think it all comes down to the value that you put on your women's sport. And I think coming from Australia, it's massive. It's again then about the families buying into the fact that sport is a way of life, really. And for them, the current role models that Australia is producing is next to nobody, really. They're running for front runners in that sense. So once the role models come out, I think the challenge of turnaround becomes that much lower. And like I'm saying, I think you also, on the flip side of things, you need to incentivize the women's game as well. And that's where the challenge comes in, where you put your funding in to incentivize the game at the lower level. But I think most importantly, it's about opportunities. Once you provide the equal opportunities, there's no reason for the girls not to flood in.
Okay, these questions coming through are much better than mine, so I might have to put these out earlier in the week and just steal a couple. We do have one from Renee from Hong Kong Cricket. How does one get the girls to buy into the program when they don't see a future in cricket, especially in developing cricket countries? I'm going to throw that open to either of you there. Or I'll just pick one of you.
Oh, it's a good point. I mean, I suppose the fact that to get them to buy into it, we all started playing cricket in the beginning because it was fun. So the initial thing is to make them enjoy it, make them want to turn up all the time, and have an environment where they feel like they're getting something out of it, even if it's just to make them happy. And then, to me, I think they start buying into the program. And if they want to go further in it, yes, there's more commitment involved. But I think at the moment the game's getting bigger and bigger, and the world's getting smaller and smaller. And I think there's going to be opportunities for all of the associate nations as well, not just member nations. And we've seen that with plenty of countries. Brazil women have gone full time now. The Argentinian women have been training really hard. Countries that I've never even heard of are playing now. Mauritius. I want to coach the Mauritius at some stage as well. Yeah, there's so many
places. Have a team, yeah.
But I think, I think we can allow them to dream, exactly like you said, Mel. From the World Cup that happened in Australia was just unbelievable, and I hope it has inspired lots of girls from lots of places to want to really start taking up cricket and start nagging their parents and going down the club and playing with the boys. That's how they have to start out.
This one's also for you, Julie. It's from someone here in Australia. With your current participation base being so small, is there talks of getting cricket into the US college system? You think that once that is achieved, the professionalism of cricket in America will be fast-tracked greatly?
Yeah, very good question. It's definitely something we've been looking at. I suppose initially, most of the playing base are all either Asian or Caribbean sort of backgrounds. So we do need to break into the mainstream community at some stage, and obviously colleges would be absolutely perfect. A lot of the sports system in America is an interesting one. They don't really have a lot of social sport outside of the college or university systems. So to me, that seems like an ideal opportunity because not everyone's going to be a professional sports person. However, there are plenty of athletes that are coming out of that system. So it's an ideal opportunity for us to promote a sport like cricket, where they could go on and potentially play for their country, and also maybe even just play at a domestic level to start growing the sport. So yeah, absolutely, colleges and universities are definitely on our development plan for the future. But in a country of 330 million people, you've got to start in key little areas and start growing it from there. But that's certainly part of the plan. Yes, approaching the colleges, great idea.
And do you see transferable skills across sports, big sports in US college system anyways, in terms of softball and lacrosse?
Yeah, absolutely. They're huge at the moment over there. Women's softball gets a lot of television time, so they get a lot of promotion. Obviously, we'd have to compete with that. But you even look at someone like Ash Barty, who's number one, in the world for tennis, and she played in the WBBL. You couldn't really get a better person to sell it for us in the US as well, because they all know who she is as well. So to me, it's a exciting time, because we can find some skills in lots of other different sports that might be transferable into cricket, and suddenly create this whole new breed of cricketers out there that are lacrosse players or hockey players or tennis players. It's fantastic.
Urooj, I know in Pakistan, badminton's probably the go-to sport for women at the moment. Where do you see an opportunity for cricket to push itself forward to become the sort of the number one choice of sport for women and girls?
I think it has to start right at the grassroots. We suffer because we lack a sporting culture within the country, unlike probably Australia and South Africa, even the USA. Sport comes as part of the culture. For us, we don't have hardly any women's school or college cricket. And I think that's a defining factor, because I think Julia mentioned she started cricket when she was 16 or 18, and she said that was late. On the flip side of things, we find girls at 16, 17, 18 and start teaching them then, just because we lack the process or the pathway from schools and colleges. So it's a difficult one for us, but if we had to start, I think the joining link would be with the school and college, because we don't have the transferable skills option really. We don't have the growing up athleticism within the country, because we lack that within the system. And I mentioned this to you, Mel, earlier. The prime example of that is Diana Baig. She belongs from a geographical region of Pakistan where she had to hitchhike to school. So she's born athletic, and she shows different when she plays at the global stage. She plays football for Pakistan as well. So I think that's, again, one of the challenges that we have.
One of probably the big announcements in the last 12 or so months, which I think will hopefully change the game exponentially is the inclusion of the under-19s now. There's a great question coming through here from Sean from Zimbabwe. With the announcement of the under-19 World Cup, has there been more interest from younger players as well as the administration in the investments of grassroots cricket? I'll throw to you first, Pricey.
Okay. That's one for the swear jar. No worries, Jackie. Yeah, I think it actually has made a big difference. We've already got our, well, obviously associate nations aren't eligible until 2023, so that's great. It gives us plenty of time to really get that promoted. But we just recently started doing some talent ID camps in February, March, and then had to obviously shut them down a little prematurely because of a pandemic. But we had about 160 people register for it around the country, and about 70% of those were all sort of under 16 and under, which is really exciting. We've got a really a broad youth sort of section of girls, obviously very, very interested in putting their hand up, and it wouldn't surprise me if it was around the announcement of that under-19 World Cup as well. So I'm sure they can do the maths, and they've counted that they're eligible for that in 2023. So, which is really exciting, and it's good for us to be able to plan our programs about that as well. We've got 2 girls in our system at the moment in our senior team who are both 15 years old. One was 14 last year when we went to Scotland, and it'll be great for her and great for all the girls that will play potentially under these girls, because they'll have some excellent experience and at the top level, and be able to help a lot of those young kids through with that experience in senior cricket.
Urooj, have you found yourself that there's been a shift in interest in the grassroots for an under-19 World Cup coming up?
Absolutely. I think not just in the shift within the players, but also within the administration. I think suddenly we've had to wrap ourselves to move faster because we suddenly have an under-19 World Cup. And it provides us an opportunity to move our high-performance pathway programs even faster. And I think it also helps in bridging the gap of the missing link that we're talking about. And you've spoken about this, Mel, a lot of times, that the win against the West Indies in the World Cup, in the recent World Cup, was probably the most clinical performance most have seen from a Pakistan team. And then just a few days within, not the same result against South Africa. So once we have that pathway programs leading into a senior side, what we essentially will do is have players cut out to fit into the national side rather than having them jump from nowhere just based on talent. So I think the under-19 World Cup is a very exciting opportunity for a lot of nations to now invest where it actually matters.
This is a question has come through on a number of themes on the board at the moment, so I'm probably just going to combine a few here. Perception is a big thing within women's sport right across the board, particularly when sport has either come from a predominantly male-orientated sport in terms of the history of the game, even though that women have been playing this fantastic game for many a year, or if it's a highly body-on-body contact kind of sport. There seems to be a perception, particularly from parents, not to allow their daughters to play. I'd love just to get your thoughts on the conversations you've had with parents or administrators that are a little bit resistant to that change and shifting their mind thought on women playing the game. And what have you found that's been a good thread of conversation to open up their minds a little bit more? I'll start with you, Julia.
I don't think you wouldn't. It's a tough one. It's sort of funny because a lot of my coaching experiences, other than in Australia, have been in countries where cricket's not really traditional, so they don't know it's a men's sport, perceived men's sport. So I haven't actually had to deal with that sort of barrier before. Most people are just like, yeah, my kid's going to play cricket, whether they're male or female, and that's been fantastic. So fortunately, I've picked the right countries to coach and to make it a little easier for myself. But at the same time, I think we're still breaking down barriers. We can keep referring to history and things that aren't necessarily even sporting oriented, and how females have managed to get through, like in marathons, we weren't allowed to even do a marathon until 1976 or something, and or even allowing women to vote. And the world didn't finish once we actually were allowed to vote, and all these sort of things. I think that it's just that shift of time, and I think again, the world's not going to collapse if females start playing cricket from a younger age. But how you actually do about that, I'm going to throw that one to Dr Urooj. And how have you done that in
Nice handball.
Well done. But yeah, I think it's interesting because there's been some really interesting conversation with parents who actually buy into the women's game in Pakistan, only because of the recent shift within the global women's structure. It's showing up more on TV. What happened at the final of the T20 World Cup at the MCG, nearly 90,000 people watching a women's cricket event. We saw it with the women's football as well. So I think because the global image is changing of the female sport, there's a lot of people having the intellectual conversations that actually matter. We still do have to deal with parents who are worried about, obviously, oh, my girl's gonna tan, or will you keep her okay, and basic things like that. We still have to come across those as well. But I think once you buy into it, your body language, your opinion in the whole matter is a reflection of you believing in it. So it's easier to convince parents, but we've had the funny conversations as well. But I think because of the global image of the sport changing, and now the structure within Pakistan changing, I think it's a lot more open, and parents are a lot more open to the idea of women playing sport. And like Mel, you mentioned, the first ever World Cup was a women's World Cup, right? So I think there's a lot of wonderful stories for women's sport.
Do you think it also helps? I mean, you mentioned that Wazim Akram and Babar Azam also came in and spoke to the girls and were really keen to get involved in the program as well. Do you think it also helps that you have senior male players with a bit of status within the cricketing community actually come out and say, how fantastic it is that the women's game is growing?
I think it's probably the need of the hour right now. When you get your male superstars to buy into the idea, and obviously openly, and then both of them were wonderful enough in offering help when the cricket does resume. So again, it's like Julia is saying, having other international sporting celebrities come and reflect your idea of what your women's game is. It's wonderful. I think we plan to do that a lot more, try and merge as much of the male and the female sport together, even plan practice sessions together. There's a lot of times where our bowlers have bowled to the male batsmen and they've batted together in pairs as well. And I think it helps the women players grow as match winners for the country as well.
I'm going to extend on from Martin's question here. He's from Uganda Cricket, and the question is to both of you really about balancing your workloads with all the other things that you've got going on in your life. The commentary across Pakistan and in Australia, coaching, the travel, all those sorts of things. How do you balance that to ensure that you're the best you every time you rock up to things, but also how can you then speak to your players, and is that important for your players to have a well-balanced life away from cricket? Julia?
Yep. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. How do I balance it? So the good thing about it is I actually love traveling. So traveling is sort of my way of relaxing as well. So I generally will incorporate, if I have to go to America, I usually go about once a month to do a week session with them, which can be a little taxing. So I generally either take an extra week or so just to see new places, discover new cultures, open your mind to things like this. And I also encourage the girls to find what is their, what relaxes them. And I think that is what this sort of last 2 months has been about, is that mindfulness and the mental side of the game. Is how are you going to relax? How are you going to have that downtime? How are you? A lot of the girls, we've got a few players who have got kids, very young kids as well. They've got their own families, full-time jobs, really high-pressure jobs. So it's really important that they find that even if it's that 5 minutes, that they can just sit down by themselves and learn to de-stress, do those sort of things. I found out quite early that a glass of red wine, or maybe two, was my way of also relaxing the night before a game. So I would stop thinking, but that's obviously not for everyone, but it certainly worked for me. And I know that the girls at the moment, we're also working on what are their personal values, what are they, in their life, what do they hold dear, and how do they want to be perceived, and what is their I am and their mantra. And I think that can also, and I'll share it with you. Mine was, I follow my dreams and I help others achieve theirs. So I'm sort of trying to really balance. It's actually a really good question, because I'm even in my mantra, I'm really making sure that I'm not going to get too stressed out and overload, which in fact, I have to admit, I probably was very close to in Tasmania. I was overworked. Very stressed out, long hours, and just trying to do everything for the team that you can. But in the end, it's just sort of, you're not the best you if you're completely exhausted and stressed out. So vitally important to be able to have that time away from the game and make sure that you're still making yourself happy. And that's what's been good about this last 2 months, definitely that focus on the mental side.
Urooj, how's your balance going in Pakistan?
Well, I think it's important to realize that if somebody's put their trust in you in a responsible role, or because you've been picked for something, you have that ability. So I think you need to believe in yourself as well. And I like Julia saying you need to show up 100%. And only then can you deliver the message as well. But it's important to, I think, find your peace, your inner peace in something. And I think it helps when you talk about it, especially to the players' point of view, because when they can see balance all the way through, it's easier for them to buy into that idea as well. So I think the mental side of things works as well. I love traveling as well. So for me, if I have to hop on a plane, Karachi, Lahore, or wherever, because I do that travel a lot as well. So the peace of a hotel room is wonderful at times. You don't necessarily need to go out. And then I love watching sport documentaries. It provides me an insight and gives me that that feeling of belonging over there. But I think you need to understand why you're there, really, and it really helps. I have one question for you, Mel. What's with the redesigning behind your back?
Oh, this here. I never thought you'd notice. I thought Julia might have piped up at some stage. So last week I had Ash Gardner's painting, but it still looked a bit bare, the wall. So this is probably the only other cricketing piece of memorabilia that I have in the house. And it's just a reflection of a time when Julia and I were actually playing together. And I thought it probably fitted in nicely with the high performance discussion, because back then we weren't professional cricketers in the sense of getting paid at all, but we certainly had a professional approach. And we beat England, so it was nice. Sorry for all the English people and fans out there. I'll see what I can come up with next week.
And then you got the 2005 World Cup photo on the other side too, Mel. So good, well done.
Okay, there we go. That's the third piece. So that's it for me. So if you can send something over from the PCB for next week, I'd greatly appreciate it. Unfortunately, we thought we were going to, I was going to sort of just waffle on a little bit, but we've kept it short and sharp, and unfortunately we've actually come to the end of the session. That's all we've got time for today. To Julia and to Urooj, thank you so much for your time now, but also the multitude of calls leading up to this as well. I've learned so much about high performance cricket, and I think what a good indicator is that all these other things are going on in my mind now for future seminars as well. So expect a call at some stage to continue the chat on all things 100% cricket. So thank you so much. For everyone that is listening in at the moment, the poll, there is one final poll that you can take part in today. We've just shared the link on the Q&A section, so please visit www.menti.com, and this time the code that you need to use is 17361. That's 17361. Now, for those of you that are watching the webinar as a recording, you can still take part. The poll will remain open till Tuesday, the 2nd of June, and then we'll present the results the beginning of next week's webinar, which I'm also now going to announce as well. So we've had leadership, we've had high performance, and week 3 of 100% cricket will be leading the game series. It'll be talking all things 100% dedication. I'll be joined by Bangladesh women's head coach Andrew Jain, and also former Indian player in her own right, and Australian women's head coach Matthew Mott to discuss coaching female teams and players to reach their potential. This will be live at the same time. That's 11 a.m. GMT, Dubai time on Wednesday, the 3rd of June. Full details about these webinars and how to sign up can be found on the ICC website. Please visit www.icc-cricket.com/100%cricket/sign up. Now, if you want to continue the discussions from today, which I think I definitely will, because I'm still wanting to pick our guest brains a little bit more, please join our 100% Cricket LinkedIn group. The group URL has been added to the Q&A section. Please send us a request so that we can connect you. And that now concludes the 100% webinar performance, high performance webinar. Thanks once again to Dr Urooj Mumtaz Khan and to, we'll call it Dr Julia Price. I'm sure she's a doctor in red wine drinking or something along those lines. Thanks for joining us. We hope to see everyone next week. Thanks, guys.